Welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast, your go-to source for everything happening in the town of Bedford's local government. Whether it's new initiatives or important decisions shaping our town's future, you'll hear it right here. This podcast is dedicated to keeping our residents informed and engaged.
Hello and welcome to the Best Little Town Podcast. My name is Bart Warner. I serve as the town manager here in Bedford, and we are currently recording on Wednesday, August 13th to recap the events of the council meeting that took place last night on Tuesday, August 12th. Again, this podcast serves to provide further information and transparency about the activities of your local government here at the town, hopefully to provide information that's useful to you as a citizen, business, or just an interested party, and to make sure that we provide maybe a little bit more background information beyond what's discussed at the meetings and to give you some insight into some of the things driving the actions of council. Of course, we meet currently on the second and fourth Tuesdays of every month at 7 o'clock p.m. in the municipal building at 215 East Main Street. Meetings take place upstairs in the council chambers, and if you're available, we'd certainly love to have you and welcome your presence. If you can't join us in person, you can watch us on the live stream provided through our partners on Media Squatch, who also help us with this podcast. We also post recordings of those meetings on YouTube. So if you go to youtube.com, search for Town of Bedford, Virginia, you can see all the meetings that we have posted up there. In addition, as part of every meeting, we approve the formal written minutes, and those are posted on our website at www.bedfordva.gov. Click on the government tab. You will then see another tab that says agendas and minutes, and you can see all the published meeting minutes from not only our town council meetings, but also our other groups such as the Planning Commission and Economic Development Authority. Last night's meeting commenced promptly at 7 o'clock. Mayor C.G. Stanley was not present. He had an out-of-town commitment and turned the reins over to Daryl Updike, who is our vice mayor, and served very capably last night and always does a good job in that role. Daryl began the meeting by noting that he would be presiding in C.G.'s place. Also, Councilman Jay Ippolito was not present. Jay had a health issue that prevented his participation, and we certainly wish him a prompt, full, and speedy recovery related to that. Again, last night's meeting began with the Pledge of Allegiance, which we always do to honor our country and kind of recognize the blessings we have to function in the system that we do. The first item of business was approval of the previous meeting minutes. That was from July 22nd, 2025. That was, of course, approved. Those minutes should be up on our website pretty darn quick if you're interested in seeing the written record, or again, you can always go back and watch the videos. Next item of business was the report of the town manager. I had a few things to touch base on. I started with a note on personnel, which I'll expand on just a bit, but Gary McKeever has been our building official with the town for several years, and Gary recently completed a really long and distinguished career as a building inspector and building official, both with Bedford County, Campbell County, and with the town of Bedford. Gary retired effective August 1st, and a lot of people have noted that they were not aware of Gary's retirement, and we'll have to offer a little bit of explanation there. That was at Gary's request. I can tell you that, he had his own personal reasons for that desire, some of which is Gary's just a pretty humble, down-to-earth guy and was not the kind of person to draw attention to himself. There are also some practical issues that relate specifically to that role, and without delving too much in matters of opinion, one of the issues is that that job carries a lot of ministerial responsibility. It involves oftentimes telling people things they don't want to know, and there's a workflow that also has to be managed. And one of the things that Gary did not want to do was create an issue with his successor in that role. If people got word of Gary's departure, that probably would have increased a lot of last-minute requests and maybe produced some overflow that Gary, we appreciate him taking this into account, just did not want to foist on the office and the operation. So getting back to my report last night, Jeremy Marcus is assuming the role of the town building official. And there was an item of new business related to this transition on the agenda, which I'll cover in a few minutes. But Jeremy was actually hired as a building inspector by Gary McKeever approximately a year ago. It's worth noting, not many people know this, Jeremy basically was Gary's hand-picked successor and was brought on for that purpose. For the past year, he's been training directly with Gary to take over in a planned succession process. Let me jump off and speak to that a little bit too. A lot of the things we do are mandatory and are driven by both law and schedule and, frankly, practicality. So it's very important to us to make sure that in all the roles we fulfill and the services we provide, that we have those covered. And so you as citizens and businesses ought to know that we do have backup plans and contingencies in place for all of our services. That became most relevant for us back in the days of the response to the COVID crisis. It's worth noting that the only time our buildings were closed to the public during that time were in a brief period in May of 2020, which was mandated by the then governor. However, we continued to collect the trash, police the streets, and keep the lights on because, frankly, that's a level of service that's minimal. So while there were people who were told to stay home, and there were probably a lot of our employees who, based on their concerns, would have preferred to, our operation continued to go forward. We never stopped providing the service we did in that situation. And that also continues forward. That's the level of service that we're committed to providing. And again, we always have contingencies in place. Of course, some people note that there are occasions where our employees do get days off for state holidays. I will tell you that as much as they might appreciate that time off, the days when they come back typically are twice as difficult in terms of workload, and particularly our trash crews. If they don't pick up your trash because of the observance of a holiday, they have to pick up twice as many accounts when they do return. So wanted to provide that background. This is most relevant recently with the turnover in the building official's office. Again, that's an important role. It requires timely response and it requires objective response. And it's not something that we could have let lapse. So Jeremy Marcus was brought in about a year ago as an inspector. That also reflects the workload of that office. We have several new developments going on in town. Easton Crossing off Independence Boulevard is about 130 homes. That's active. They have their model homes, which are coming out of the ground. There are also several infill developments. Before he left, Gary advised me that there really weren't too many, if any, vacant lots in town that didn't have some kind of building permit on them. So again, Jeremy Marcus has been on board and has been training. We have kept that building inspector position in the office, again, based on the workload. And also, I'm happy to announce that that has been filled by Daniel Field, who is a native of Bedford, Liberty High School, and Virginia Tech graduate. And he has been hired to fill the building inspector's role. The idea, too, is that Daniel is now working closely with Jeremy to be trained, to get up to speed. And our ideal is that someday, whenever Jeremy decides to retire, that Daniel will be ready to step right in and provide an uninterrupted level of service. That's a lot more detail than I provided last night, but I thought it might be relevant or interesting to at least a few of our listeners. Also last night, I reported that we are working to abate a significant drainage issue on Railroad Avenue that has come to light in conjunction with the new development across from the 620 building. We're not saying that the development caused the issue, but in the process of that review and that construction, it did bring more of that to light, and it did identify some issues with some pipes in particular that have been damaged and that need to be replaced. We are aware of the work. We have been aware of the work and have been working with the property owner to formulate a plan. I will say that that repair work is going to be quite disruptive, and once we start it, it's not something that we can finish. The biggest impact is likely to be on the private parking for the apartment building. And so we're working with the property owner. The residents of the building should have been advised by the property manager, but in case that hasn't happened, just wanted to make that clear on this occasion. Before we commence, again, because once we start, we can't really stop, we want to make sure we have all the resources necessary. There are supply chain issues with concrete pipes and things like that, but we think we have all that squared away, and we think we can start the repair work within a week. Those of you living in the 620 Railroad Avenue building, we regret the inconvenience, but long term, we know it's something that needs to be fixed, and we would like to do it right one time. Also reported last night that the Bedford County Fair, which is an event presented by a private limited liability corporation, again, it's a private entity, will take place at Liberty Lake Park from Friday, August 22nd through Sunday, August 24th. That's an event that was reviewed and approved by Town Council. We have had a couple of questions lately about our facility use policy and the fact that we do allow private entities to occupy our parks from time to time to sponsor major events. In addition to the county fair, again, which is a private event, it's not an official county event. We had to be educated about that ourselves, frankly. There are also certain events such as the 3rd of July festival that takes place in Liberty Park. That's actually produced by a private entity. A gentleman named Jonathan Hayden puts that on. We recognize that, the parks are there for the benefit of the public, but also we do have multiple places around town for passive recreational use. And the council's view has been, the large events are popular and are something that the public does enjoy. Frankly, the town does not have an entity to sponsor those things. Again, we have to continually educate ourselves and our citizens about the effects of reversion. Whereas the city once had a fully staffed recreation department that performed at a very high level, that was discontinued back in 2013. And in fact, most of the events and activities that happen in the parks, and particularly with athletics and recreational activities, are performed by entities other than the town. The Bedford County Parks and Recreation Department offers a robust list of recreational offerings. They do a good job. They're one of our major tenants in our park facilities. But otherwise, events like Centerfest, again, the 3rd of July observance and this Bedford County Fair are private entities that do make use of our facilities. The last thing I reported on last night was that the first day of classes in Bedford County Public Schools is today. That's August 13th. Those of you who have to get up and out the door at work by 8 o'clock probably notice some impact on traffic patterns. We still have the Bedford Primary School on Bedford Avenue and Bedford Elementary School off Burks Hill Road within our limits, and that morning and afternoon traffic does impact everybody around it. Today you might have noticed some maybe slower traffic or maybe more traffic than usual during your morning commute. And you may notice some traffic beginning at about 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon when the elementary and primary schools are released. Also, Liberty Middle School and Liberty High School, while they are not located currently within town limits, also do generate a fair amount of traffic when school opens and closes, particularly at the intersection of Route 122 and Forest Road / Longwood Avenue. So just ask that people be aware of that and plan and adjust accordingly. Next item of business for the agenda was appearances before council. This is a part of the agenda where we allow folks to sign up to speak to council about, frankly, any topic that might be on your mind. There is a time limit of 3 minutes. We do ask that people be respectful of the fact that council has other matters to take up and that there are also other folks who have things on their mind to share. But again, we do have that as a regular feature of our council agenda. Last night, Mr. Tim Brook of 840 Randolph Street got up to speak. He began by offering a prayer on behalf of the people who are typically poor and neglected in the community. And he also offered a condensed reading from Matthew chapter 25 in the Bible, noting that the time limit was kind of practical issue for him in terms of what he wanted to share. Mr. Brooks shared his view that the government appears to be acting against poor people in general. He was specifically mentioning some signs that have recently been posted in the farmers market area related to loitering issues. Those signs reference town code, which also includes a reference to the prosecution of people who are in violation of that. Mr. Brooks shared his view that those signs are, well, he basically just doesn't agree with the nature of those signs, and he thinks they are negatively impacting what should be our view towards those who are less fortunate and may be discouraging people from seeking services near that area. And he asked that council reconsider the language on those signs, and also talked about some other situations in which we do close public facilities such as restrooms in areas like the farmers market. The next speaker was Herman Evans, who gave his address as P.O. Box 281. He stated that he himself is at the farmers market on a daily basis, and he sees that people come to use the restrooms and sometimes wait to take care of other business in town. He shared his observation that sometimes people from out of town find their way down there, and they find that as a resting place, and they're here to just check out the community and determine whether or not it's a place they want to spend some time in. Mr. Evans shared his view that people should have the opportunity to use public restrooms. The next speaker was Erica McFadden, who is the manager of the farmers market. She noted that she had appeared before council once before and requested more police presence related to concerns about potential vandalism and loitering. Shared her view that the wording on the signs seems rather punitive, and has expressed her view that that was not really her intent. Again, I don't want to speak on Ms. McFadden's behalf. When she had come to council, suggested that perhaps we could add some cameras and have more police presence rather than threatening prosecution. The next speaker was Mr. Donnie Carter, who lives at 1446 Belmont Drive. He said he supports removal of the loitering signs. He noted his observation that he sees people at the farmers market and in other public places gathering at picnic tables just on a social basis and also waiting to receive services in the area. And he shared his view that the signs we posted may be overkill. Next item of new business was council comments, and this is the part of the meeting where each member of council, similar to appearances before council by the public, have an opportunity to share comments in general and things that are on their mind. Again, last night with Councilman Todd Foreman, who noted that last week there was a meeting regarding a downtown strategic plan. That's been something in the works under the guidance of our Community Development Director, Mary Zirkle, for some time, and there is a strategic planning team that met with a consultant who provided several ideas. Todd Foreman noted that he's spoken with Mayor Stanley about the fact that we will likely have a work session, which will be public and will also be broadcast and recorded moving forward, to discuss that in greater detail. Councilman Stacey Haley thanked everyone present for their attendance and noted that the Elks Lodge will be hosting a first responders lunch on August 27th. Councilman Dave Foster also thanked everyone who was in attendance and thanked the people who spoke for sharing their comments. He basically shared his personal view that he was enjoying the cooler weather and generally quiet time over the last couple of weeks within the community. Councilman Dwight Evans likewise thanked people for attending the meeting and also thanked people for watching online. He spoke to the National Night Out event, which was sponsored by our police department last Tuesday at the farmers market. Had approximately 250 people who attended, and he gave special recognition to Connie Tuck for all her efforts in organizing and executing that event. Connie is the administrative assistant for the police department, so if you call our department directly on the non-emergency line, Connie's the person that you probably deal with, and she is, again, not to editorialize too much, but one of the most pleasant people and finest folks you will ever have the chance to interact with. Dwight also followed up on my comments to remind people that school is starting and to be careful, particularly in situations where the weather may not be as good as we would hope it would be. Vice Mayor Updike began his comments by noting that longtime Public Works employee and town retiree Roger Ruff had passed away recently, and Darrell shared some of his insights and interactions with Roger during Darrell's previous employment with the city of Bedford then himself. Darrell also shared his view about the positive effect of the National Night Out, stating that it was a good event. There was a dunking booth as part of that event that was staffed by, among others, Police Chief Jim Moore. That was used to raise money for a mammogram screening organization. And last night, Jim noted that they had raised about $200 that they donated to that group related to the event. Darrell also spoke to the fact that the appearances before council are an important and welcome part of our usual meeting agenda. With that, we moved forward into public hearings. There were a couple. The first related to the request for a conditional use permit by Bedford Bungalow LLC for a homestay use located at 628 Baltimore Avenue on tax parcel 195-2-T. Without speaking inappropriately about what might be proprietary information, homestay uses are typically associated with things like Airbnb or vacation rental by owner type uses, and the Planning Commission considered this previously in July, and it did come forward to council last night for a public hearing as required by the process for a conditional use. There were no speakers for this public hearing, and the matter was closed by Vice Mayor Updike. Second public hearing related to a budget amendment for a net appropriation of over $1.8 million for a consolidated rail infrastructure and safety improvement grant, as well as an American World War II Heritage Cities program grant. These are a couple of grants that the town has sought and received. The CRISI or CRISI grant relates to the plans to possibly locate an Amtrak passenger rail station here. The $1.8 million is the total amount. Is the net amount for this grant as well as the World War II Heritage Cities grant. The World War II Heritage Cities grant amounts to $9,000 for signage related to Bedford's designation as the only World War II Heritage City within Virginia. In order to receive these grants, we have to budget for them, and they're in the case of the transportation grant, which is certainly the larger of the two, that money is provided by the federal government but requires a local match. So the total expenditure will pass through the town's budget, but the town's contribution is only a portion of that, typically 20%. In order to amend the budget to absorb these two grants, particularly the rail grant, into the current year budget, we had to have a public hearing, which was advertised and opened last night. There were no speakers, and Vice Mayor consequently closed that meeting. We then moved forward into the new business portion of the meeting agenda. First item was appointment of a building and maintenance official. Building official is required to be appointed by the governing body of any locality that enforces the Uniform Statewide Building Code. Here within the town, that position also serves as the code enforcement officer who enforces all applicable civil regulations, including zoning and property maintenance codes. And for those of you who are keeping track or may have had direct involvement in that includes things such as enforcement of regulations related to high grass and weeds. As I mentioned previously, Gary McKeever recently retired from the position. Jeremy Marquis was employed by the town on September 23rd, 2024, based on his qualifications, certifications, and experience, and has been completing training under Mr. McKeever's guidance with the understanding that he would assume the position upon Mr. McKeever's retirement. Last night, Town Council was requested to appoint Jeremy G. Marquis as building official for the enforcement of Part 1 and Part 2 of the Virginia Uniform State Building Code, as well as appointing him as code enforcement officer for all applicable civil regulations. On a motion made by Councilman Todd Foreman, seconded by Stacy Haley, There was a unanimous vote of those present, 5-0, in favor of appointing Jeremy as building official and code enforcement officer. 2 members were absent. Next item of new business related to the public hearing regarding the conditional use permit for a homestay proposed at 628 Baltimore Avenue. Back on July 2nd, the Planning Commission held a public hearing regarding this matter. The applicant and one adjacent owner spoke at that hearing. The applicant described that she would stay in the house when she was in town and would like to rent it when she was not in Bedford. The citizen that spoke at that time owns an adjoining house that they rent to a relative. He was concerned about transient visitors and dogs wandering off the property and requested a fence be added. The applicant noted that she would like to add a fence in the future for her own dog. At that meeting in July, the planning commissioners asked when the owner may begin the rental program to be sure she was aware that zoning approval must be used within a time frame to remain valid. The owner was clear that the homestay use must be established with a business license by paying transient occupancy tax or through the annual registration process. The Planning Commission, back on July 2nd, voted unanimously to recommend approval of the request. Last night, Town Council was requested to consider a resolution to approve the conditional use permit. Motion was made to approve that by Councilman Dwight Evans, seconded by Dave Foster. Councilman Stacy Haley did ask one question about the time frame involved with the homestay use. Our Community Development Director, Mary Zirkle, responded that under our zoning regulations, the use has a limit of 30 days or less. Moving forward, the council members who were present voted unanimously to approve the conditional use request with 2 members absent. Next item of new business related to the Chrissy grant, which I mentioned previously. To provide some greater detail, town staff submitted a grant application to the Federal Rail Administration, or FRA, back in May of 2024 for a Consolidated Rail Infrastructure and Safety Improvement, or CRISI, grant with authorization from Town Council. This grant was requested to pay for the initial phases of project for preliminary engineering and environmental review related to a proposed passenger rail station within the town of Bedford. Again, this is to further the planning and design of that proposal, as well as necessary track and platform work, parking and multimodal connectivity to and from the proposed station, and assessment of the impacts to the regional economy and traffic patterns. The town has been awarded the FRA reimbursable grant for $1,481,000 with a 20% local match requirement in the amount of $375,000. The grant agreement has a budget period of 2 years to be completed. The resolution passed by council back on May 14, 2024, provided that certain assurances and forms would be signed by staff as part of the application submittal, as well as committing the 20% required match. That resolution required council to affirmatively act on a grant award if one was made. In addition, the resolution stated that in order to execute and deliver any agreement that requires the expenditure of public funds, further action of council was required. As of last night, we asked council to accept the grant award, authorize the town manager to accept the agreement with FRA, and to authorize the expenditure of public grant funds over the next 2 fiscal years. Following the execution of the agreement, the town will procure a consultant that is acceptable under the federal terms to conduct the engineering and environmental review. Essentially, what we had to do last night was amend our budget to accept this grant, absorb the expenditure within our budget, but to allocate our local match. Essentially, what we were doing is committing to pursuing with the architectural and engineering design work related to a railway station here in Bedford that we've been talking about for quite some time. The town's local match is $375,000. Given the timing of that, we can space that expenditure out over 2 years, but we did have to specifically indicate that we would commit that level of funding in response to accepting the grant. I mentioned this a little bit last night. I know the question on everybody's mind is, what does this mean in the grand scheme of things? Bedford continues to pursue the possibility of an Amtrak station here within town limits. To that point, we've been working at the federal level. Congressman Morgan Griffith was very generous in his assistance in obtaining this grant for us. Where we are now is Amtrak has listed us in their account of future stations that could be open. We are now beginning the architecture and design work to plan for the station, again, which will probably take a couple of years. Once that is complete, we would then move forward to the construction phase, which could be a multi-year endeavor and also would be a rather expensive proposition. The latest figure we have is that the construction is estimated to be about $25 million. Again, Bedford's share would not be quite that much. There would be a local match of over $4 million required. We have been talking to local partners, including Bedford County, Franklin County, and Botetourt County, about the possibility of sharing in that expense. We also continue to seek grant funding or other assistance where it might be available. In that regard, we are hoping that the Commonwealth of Virginia, which has invested heavily in rail and other places where it makes sense, might see fit to share a little bit of that money our way. In fact, we wouldn't be asking for quite as much as what they've done elsewhere. On a motion by Councilman Haley, seconded by Councilman Foster, the 5 members present unanimously voted to accept the grant and commit the $375,000 of local funding to advance that work. So again, the time frame is the engineering and design work is probably going to take 2 years, which gets us to about 2027. After that, we would be in a position to talk about constructing an actual station stop here in Bedford. We'll have a little bit more idea about when that would actually take place, but it's likely to be a multi-year process, and one of the biggest challenges will be finding the money locally to meet that match. The next item of new business was appropriation of money related to the World War II Heritage Cities grant. On July 8th, Council adopted a resolution to accept a grant award from the World War II Heritage Cities program. We received a grant of $9,000. We had to basically vote to accept that by putting an expenditure in the line item for that in the budget and also accepting the revenue as part of our budget. That money will be used for signage related to the branding of that program and also general promotion of it. On a motion by Councilman Haley, seconded by Councilman Todd Foreman, Council voted unanimously to accept the grant and make the appropriate changes to the current year budget. With that, having no other new business, Vice Mayor Updike adjourned the meeting. I just want to remind people that, again, our current schedule is that we meet the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. We do have a meeting coming up on August 26th. Among the matters that will be discussed there, we will have a presentation from a consultant who's been examining our electric operation and particularly our rates. There will also be a public hearing related to that matter. Again, without editorializing a bit, just want to make people aware that the gist of the situation is that we are facing a situation in which our electric rates are likely to increase. I will note that particularly at the staff level and on council level, none of us are pleased about that at all. We welcome your comments, but I just want to remind folks that, nobody is really in favor of this, including council. All of us who live in town and within the service area would be paying these increased rates. They are largely driven by what's happening in the economy outside of our community. And a big part of that is the fact that based on regulatory policy in this country, we have not added electric generation that keeps pace with demand. And it's simply stated we have a limited number of power plants. We have a limited ability to construct new plants based on regulations at the state and federal level. And that's not venturing into political territory, but it's not really a matter of the two major parties' involvement either. It's just a fact of supply is being seriously outpaced by demand. And as we learned in our economics classes, that has consequences. We're doing our best to try to minimize those impacts. In fact, I will note that this is a trend we've observed for years and have reported on. And for the last few years, Bedford, the town, has absorbed some increasing costs. We did pass those along to customers, which we find regrettable, mostly because we pay those ourselves. But we're reaching the point where we can no longer simply absorb those on behalf of our customers, and regrettably, we may have to consider raising some rates. We're looking for input on that. We certainly appreciate ideas. If you want to share your opinion and concerns, obviously we're happy to hear that. We also note that we will need to come up with some relief programs for those who will require that assistance if those rates go up. I use the term if. I do want to let people know that it's a very serious likelihood that the rates will be increasing in some form or fashion. Also, just as a point of information, too, for our electric customers in particular, we know times are tough. We know all their prices are going up. And we do get quite a few questions about the bills that we receive as customers. There's really two parts to that. One is related to what is necessary to deliver that energy to you as a customer before you ever use it. And in simplest terms, I'm talking about what it takes to get the power to the switch, whether you use it or not. Those costs are pretty considerable for us. Going back to, again, the electricity that we provide has to be created somewhere. While the town does have the ability to generate some of its own power that we provide to be available for your use, we also have to purchase a lot of that from other places. And again, the cost of that continues to go up. So, we hear from people a lot of time that have questions about their bill. And one of the things we hear is that, well, I didn't use that much power. We understand that, but a significant portion of the bill, and we include all of the charges, including a power cost adjustment, which we get a lot of questions about. Significant amount of our cost relates to just getting it to you. So that's part of your bill, and then you're paying, in addition to that, whatever you use. So may not be the best situation, and we're happy to entertain ideas about that. But also, again, it's possible for you not to use a lot of power, but still face a significant minimum bill because, again, there are things in the background that people don't think about, such as compressors on refrigerators that run continuously. And again, we're on the hook to make sure that you have the power you need. And part of that is trying to do that in a smart way to where we make sure you have enough you need and that we're not short on that. So again, power bills, rising costs of groceries, we're all aware of those things. We all experience those things. And I just would request that you be mindful of that if you do speak to council about that. And keep in mind that we're all in the same boat here, and we're certainly open to ideas, but we would appreciate some understanding and assistance if you're willing to provide it in speaking to some of our legislators at the state and federal level to at least allow construction of some new generation in ways that make sense that would benefit all of us. And of course, reasonable minds will differ as to how that happens. Don't ordinarily go to great lengths to talk about upcoming meetings, but I think this one is something that is important to everybody and will certainly affect everybody. So certainly want to make people aware of it. We hope you will be able to come and speak. Just ask that, again, you be respectful of the fact that this is not something that anybody is really in favor of. If we're talking about rate increases, we're open to creative ideas, but hope that you will also respect the elected officials as they struggle to do what they think is best long-term to make sure that we have the services we need and how to develop contingencies to deal with any unintended consequences there. On that note, as always, we welcome your participation in the community. We appreciate the fact that you're here. This day and age, people pretty much can live anywhere they want to, and we are grateful for the fact that you choose to live in Bedford. Of course, we feel the same way about it. There's no other place we'd rather be. If you have any concerns, questions, suggestions, particularly if you're having a problem, please contact us directly. The municipal building is open Monday through Friday most days, unless there's a holiday, beginning at 8:30 a.m. The main telephone number is 540-587-6001. Again, my name is Bart Warner. You can email me directly at bwarner@bedfordva.gov, and I'll be happy to do what I can to assist you with any questions or comments that you might have. Thank you very much for your attention to this episode of the podcast. I look forward to joining you again. Till that time, be on the lookout for increased school activity and hopefully more comfortable temperatures. And I hope you will be able to join me again on August 27th for the Best Little Town podcast.